So picture this scenario. You're 85 years old. You're universally recognized as this, like, national hero.
Right. You've completely earned your rest at that point.
Exactly. You've survived decades of grueling desert wandering. You've outlived all of your peers. And now it is finally time to retire.
Time for the pension.
Right. The leader of your nation comes to you and basically offers you a blank check for your golden years. A seaside villa, a quiet pasture, literally whatever you want.
Yeah, you take the villa. I'd take the villa.
Obviously. But instead of asking for a comfortable chair and a scenic view, you look your commanding officer dead in the eye, point to the most hostile, heavily fortified, giant-infested territory on the map, and you say, "Give me that mountain."
Which is just, I mean, it is a completely unhinged request by modern standards.
Totally unhinged.
You just don't ask for the hardest possible battle when you've already earned your rest, you know?
Right. But that specific image is the catalyst for everything we are talking about today. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are exploring a really profound paradigm shift regarding how we view the absolute hardest things in our lives.
It's a heavy topic, but a really necessary one.
It really is. Our source material today is an excerpt from Gospel Akia's Christian Living newsletter, and the piece is actually titled, "Give Me This Mountain."
Yeah, taking inspiration directly from the 85-year-old hero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The mission of this deep dive is to unpack this concept that the massive looming challenges you are facing right now, and, like, if you were listening to this, you definitely have a mountain in your life.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone does.
Right, whether it's a terrifying career pivot, a brutal project, or just a personal struggle that's draining you dry. We're looking at how to stop seeing those mountains as roadblocks and start recognizing them as custom-built assignments.
That phrasing is key. Custom-built assignments.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when we talk about a mountain in this context, we aren't just talking about, like, having a bad day at the office.
Far from it. A mountain in this framework represents a massive, imposing, deeply intimidating challenge. It's the thing standing right between you and the next phase of your life.
The thing you really don't want to deal with.
Exactly. But the crucial shift here is moving away from the survival mindset. Because most of us, we look at a towering problem and think, how do I avoid this? Or how do I just survive until this is over?
Just hold my breath until Friday, basically.
Right. But the premise we're analyzing suggests that some mountains are not obstacles meant to be bypassed. They are promises meant to be possessed.
Wow. Promises to possess.
Yeah, they are fundamentally tied to your ultimate purpose.
That flips the script entirely. I mean, it implies there is actual intrinsic value hidden inside the friction. And that brings us back to our 85-year-old action hero, Caleb.
The guy asking for the giant-infested territory.
Right. This is an ancient biblical narrative, but the psychology behind it is just fascinating. At 85, he specifically requests the region where the Anakim live.
And those were literally giants.
Literal giants,
Yeah.
residing in heavily fortified cities. To use a modern analogy, it's like going to the gym at age 85, and instead of asking the personal trainer for a gentle water aerobics class, you ask them to double the plates on the squat rack.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. So I have to ask, why? Why actively seek out the harder path when everyone else would totally understand if you just took the easy road?
Well, to really grasp Caleb's mindset, we have to rewind the clock 45 years.
Okay, take us back.
So when Caleb was a 40-year-old man, he was sent on a scouting mission from a place called Kadesh Barnea.
The launching pad, basically.
Exactly. Kadesh Barnea was the border of the land they were supposed to conquer. 12 scouts went in to assess the territory. Now, Caleb and one other guy brought back a confident, faithful report.
They were ready to go.
Yeah, they said, look, yes, the people are big, the cities are fortified, but we can totally take this.
But the other 10 scouts didn't see it that way, did they?
Not at all. The other 10 were completely paralyzed by the mountain. They looked at the giants and they panicked. And worse, they let their fear infect the entire camp.
Oh, wow. So the panic spread.
It spread everywhere. And because of that collective doubt, an entire generation was essentially sentenced to wander in circles in the wilderness for 45 years until they died off.
That is tragic, just walking in circles.
Right. And Caleb had to sit there for 4.5 decades watching his peers perish in the desert, all because they refused to climb the mountain that was right in front of them.
Oh, so he had to pay for their mistake, basically.
He did. So when he finally gets his chance at age 85, he says, I am as strong today as I was then. He isn't just trying to prove he's tough.
He's cashing in a 45-year-old rain check.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that Caleb understood the mountain was his specific assignment. He didn't view those fortified cities as a punishment or like a stroke of bad luck.
Right, he saw it differently.
He saw a landscape that was custom built for his destiny. He recognized that the exact place where everyone else saw guaranteed failure was the exact place his purpose resided.
There is a quote from the newsletter that completely anchors this for me. It says, faith does not always ask for easier roads. Sometimes it asks for higher ground.
That is such a powerful line.
It really is,
Yeah.
because we are so deeply conditioned to optimize for comfort. We want life hacks, we want shortcuts, we pray for the traffic to clear out of our way.
Give me the path of least resistance.
Always. But this suggests that sometimes the most purposeful thing you can do is demand the steeper incline.
Because the steeper incline forces adaptation. I mean, it requires a different version of you to emerge.
You literally have to grow to climb it.
Exactly. The text actually brings in that famous concept from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 17, where Jesus says faith as small as a mustard seed can tell a mountain to move from here to there.
Right, the moving mountains verse.
Yeah, and it's often treated as a poetic metaphor. But in the context of this paradigm, it's a functional framework.
How so?
The mountain only moves or gets conquered when you stop treating it as an movable enemy and start treating it as terrain you are meant to navigate.
Okay, so we have this ancient blueprint of the mountain as assignment. But the newsletter doesn't just leave it in the ancient world, which I appreciate.
No, it brings it into a much more modern framing.
It pivots to show how this mindset actually plays out in radically different contexts. And I'm going to be honest, the juxtaposition the text uses is incredibly jarring.
You're referring to the comparison between Colonel Harlan Sanders and Jesus Christ?
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. And honestly, I struggled with this at first.
It is a wild pivot.
It is. Because as a reader, you are tracking with these grand, epic, biblical metaphors of giants and walled cities, and suddenly, boom, we are talking about the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Right, KFC.
The text lays out Sanders' story. At age 65, he is standing at the foot of his own massive mountain. His previous business failed. He's essentially broke. He's living off a tiny Social Security check, and his only asset is a recipe for fried chicken.
A recipe, and really an unshakable conviction that it had value.
Right. And he refuses to just quietly fade away. He drives around the country, sleeping in his car, knocking on doors, facing what had to be hundreds, maybe thousands of rejection.
He just kept going.
He pushed through, and that mountain of rejection becomes the global KFC empire. Okay, so that's a great story of entrepreneurial grit. But then, in the exact same section, the narrative pivots directly to Jesus Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, facing the absolute agony of the crucifixion.
Yeah, the scene in Gethsemane is described as being so intensely overwhelming that Jesus experienced a real medical condition called hematidrosis.
Sweating drops of blood, right?
Exactly, sweating drops of blood under extreme psychological distress. He literally prays for the cup of suffering to pass from him, asking if there is any other way.
Okay, stop right there. I have to play devil's advocate here, because we are comparing a guy trying to franchise a chicken recipe in the 1950s to the literal execution of Jesus Christ.
It's a huge leap.
That is a massive, almost absurd pivot in scale and consequence. How can we possibly connect these two vastly different experiences without totally trivializing one of them?
Look, it's a very fair critique. It feels like whiplash when you read it. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the focus isn't on the historical weight of the event.
Okay.
Or even the global scale of the suffering. The connection is entirely about the vision required to climb when the mountain seems insurmountable.
Break down that word for me in this context, vision.
So both figures, in their own vastly different realms, obviously, arrived at a moment where the obstacle was undeniable, painful, and just overwhelmingly difficult.
A literal mountain.
Right. Sanders could have looked at his age and his empty bank account and said, well, this is a signal to stop.
Most people would have.
Jesus, facing torture and execution, actively wished for another path. But in both cases, they recognized that the mountain was the non-negotiable gateway to their purpose.
Oh, the gateway. I see.
For Sanders, the vision was a business legacy where others only saw a broke retiree. For Jesus, the vision was cosmic. The text references Hebrews 12:2, which states that Jesus endured the cross for the joy that was set before him.
That phrase always gets me. The joy set before him. Like, He wasn't enjoying the agony. He was looking completely past it.
Exactly. He wasn't focused on the nails. He was focused on the redemption of humanity. He saw generations unborn finding their way back to God. He saw the ultimate victory.
Wow. Okay.
So the thread connecting the entrepreneur and the savior isn't the severity of their trial. It's the refusal to let the presence of a mountain dictate the end of the journey.
They both said, this is not the end of the road. This is the way through.
Precisely. They push through the friction.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's about the refusal to interpret friction as a stop sign. And that leads to a really crucial observation made in this piece. It says, there is favor, yes. There's grace, yes. But none of these eliminates the effort required to reach the peak.
That destroys a very common, very modern misconception.
It totally does. I think
Yeah.
there is this toxic positivity out there that suggests if you are truly walking in your purpose or something is meant to be, then the universe will just magically open all the doors for you.
Right, the good vibes only mentality.
Exactly. That it's supposed to feel effortless. If you face resistance, well, then maybe it's not your path.
But the reality is often the exact inverse. The fact that it is your purpose might be exactly why it is the hardest thing you will ever do.
Because it demands the most of you.
Think about getting accepted into a highly prestigious medical school. Getting the acceptance letter is the favor, it's the grace.
Yeah, that's the open door.
But that letter doesn't eliminate the next 4 years of grueling, sleep-deprived study. The mountain is the curriculum. You don't get to bypass the effort just because you belong there.
Wow.
The effort is the actual mechanism of your transformation.
I absolutely love that. The acceptance letter doesn't take the test for you.
Exactly. You still have to do the work.
Okay, so let's bring this down to the ground level. Recognizing that the terrifying project in front of me is actually an opportunity for growth is a nice mental exercise.
Right. It's good in theory.
But standing at the base of the mountain and actually lacing up your boots to climb is a completely different reality. How do we initiate that action? Because the text makes a really striking claim that the giant standing on top of the mountain isn't actually your biggest problem.
Not even close. The greatest threat is entirely internal.
Internal.
Yeah. The piece introduces this dynamic by quoting Sir Edmund Hillary, the first confirmed climber to reach the summit of Mount Everest.
Okay, a literal mountain climber.
Right. His quote is legendary. He said, "It is not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves."
Which carries so much weight coming from a guy who conquered the most dangerous literal rock on the planet.
He knew what he was talking about.
He's openly admitting that the ice, the altitude, the lack of oxygen, those were secondary enemies. The primary enemy was his own mind.
Precisely. The concept here is the mountain within, and it is far more paralyzing than the physical circumstances we face.
The newsletter gives this vivid, almost uncomfortable breakdown of what that internal mountain looks like. It talks about inner doubt. It mentions the voice of limitation.
All those internal narratives.
Right. And there is this one specific phrase that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. It calls it the pool of despondency.
Oh, that is highly evocative.
It perfectly captures that specific flavor of dread, doesn't it? It's not a sharp panic, it's a pool.
You just sink into it.
Yes, it's a stagnant, heavy place where you just wallow in the perceived impossibility of your situation. You rehearse your past failures, you pre-grieve your future failures, and you just sink.
And those internal narratives are the actual gatekeepers locking us out of our own potential.
Exactly.
And if we review our 3 case studies through this lens, a very clear sequence emerges. This sequence is not accidental at all.
Okay, walk me through the sequence.
Before Caleb could physically take the land from the giants, he first had to conquer the internal doubt that had paralyzed his entire generation.
Right, he had to believe he could do it.
Before Colonel Sanders could knock on 1,000 doors, he first had to overcome the internal temptation to accept defeat and just collect his social security.
He had to step out of the car.
And before Christ endured the physical cross, he had to fight the internal battle in Gethsemane to align his will with the assignment.
Oh, wow.
The internal victory is always, without exception, the prerequisite for the external conquest.
So what does this all mean? Let's say I am the listener. I am driving in my car right now or doing the dishes, and I am actively drowning in that pool of despondency.
It's a tough place to be.
The voice of limitation in my head has a massive megaphone. How does this text suggest we actually flatten that internal mountain? Because it's one thing to say, oh, just conquer your doubt. But practically, how does a human being do that? Does the fear just evaporate if you pray hard enough or think positive thoughts?
This is perhaps the most vital clarification in the entire discussion. The answer is no. The fear does not evaporate.
It doesn't.
Not at all. The psychological mechanism of overcoming fear, as outlined here, is not the eradication of the feeling. It is behavioral activation in spite of the feeling.
Okay, wait, unpack that for me.
The text explicitly defines overcoming fear not as the absence of doubt, but as stepping over the doubt and getting things done anyway.
Wait, really dig into that. Overcoming fear means stepping over it, not waiting for it to leave.
Exactly. We have this really false expectation that courage feels like supreme confidence.
Right, like you're supposed to feel like a superhero.
It doesn't. Courage usually feels like nausea. Courage is the assessment that the assignment is more important than the anxiety.
That is so good.
If you wait for the fear to completely vanish before you ask for the territory or launch the business or have the difficult conversation, you will literally be waiting forever.
You'll just be stuck at the bottom of the mountain.
Right. You have to take action alongside the fear. Your brain actually learns that the mountain isn't fatal by watching you climb it while terrified.
So it's like you bring the fear with you in the passenger seat, but you do not let it touch the steering wheel.
That is a perfect, modern framing. Keep it in the passenger seat. And to anchor this hope, the text brings in a really fascinating historical quote regarding an ancient leader named Zerubbabel.
Okay, Zerubbabel.
Now, for context, Zerubbabel was a governor tasked with a monumental assignment, rebuilding a massive temple that had been completely destroyed.
So he's looking at literal ruins.
He is standing in front of literal mountains of rubble, entirely overwhelmed, lacking resources, and probably drowning in that pool of despondency we mentioned.
He's looking at a generational disaster, basically.
Right. And in that moment of being totally overwhelmed, a declaration is made over his situation. It says, "Who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you shall become a plain."
A plain, meaning like flat ground.
Yes. Flat, level, manageable ground.
So the towering impossibility gets reduced to paving stones.
Exactly. It's a promise that what stands before you today, intimidating and unyielding as it seems, will not stand forever.
That is incredible.
When confronted with persistent action, faith, and the courage to take the very first step, despite internal terror, the mountain loses its power. It goes from being an impossible barrier to being the very ground you walk on, but you have to initiate the friction.
This entire perspective completely rewires how we should interact with difficulty. I mean, it's been an incredible journey today, so let's quickly consolidate the ground we've covered.
Let's do it.
We started by looking at whatever massive, terrifying challenge is currently dominating your life. And through the lens of this text, we've learned that we need to aggressively relabel those challenges.
They are not random.
Right. They're not random acts of chaos meant to break you. They are custom-built assignments designed to elevate you.
And we've seen that whether you are an 85-year-old visionary tired of waiting, a 65-year-old entrepreneur starting from absolute zero, or anyone just trying to navigate a brutal season of life, the friction is the feature, not the bug.
The feature, not the bug. I love that.
The effort required to scale the rock face is an unavoidable, essential component of your purpose.
The grace you've been given doesn't eliminate the sweat you have to pour out. And perhaps the most actionable takeaway we had today. Before you ever swing a sword at the giant in front of you, you have to win the silent war inside your own mind.
The hardest battle.
It is. You have to actively choose to step out of the pool of despondency, acknowledge your fear, and take the next right step anyway. You don't wait for the confidence. You build the confidence through the climb.
It is just a relentless, pragmatic call to courage.
It truly is. So I want to bring this directly to you, the listener, as we wrap up today. I want you to visualize the exact mountain standing in your way right now.
The one you're dreading.
The one you've been losing sleep over. The one you've been hoping someone else will just magically handle. What if that massive, intimidating roadblock is actually the doorway to the most purposeful chapter of your life?
It changes everything.
What if the universe hasn't handed you a trap, but a treasure map, and X marks the summit?
It completely reorients your entire posture toward tomorrow morning.
It really does. But I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to chew on. Something to ponder that expands on everything we've explored today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this entire deep dive talking about how to face the mountain, how to embrace the struggle, and how to find purpose in the climb. But think back to Caleb's story for a second. Remember the 10 scouts?
The ones who panicked?
Right. Remember that entire preceding generation who looked at the giants, gave into their fear, and refused to climb. The text tells us they spent the rest of their lives wandering in the wilderness.
They successfully avoided the danger of the mountain, sure, But their reward was a lifetime of wandering in circles.
Exactly. They traded purpose for a false sense of safety. So here is the question I want you to ask yourself today. If our greatest, most terrifying challenges are actually custom-built assignments designed for our ultimate growth, what does that say about the periods in our lives when we don't have a mountain to climb?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
When everything is perfectly easy, flat, and comfortable, are those seasons meant for much-needed rest? Or are they a warning sign?
A warning that we've stopped moving.
Exactly. Are they a signal that, much like that paralyzed generation before Caleb, we have stopped advancing? Have we settled into the wilderness, safely avoiding the very heights we were always meant to conquer? Just something to think about the next time you catch yourself wishing for an easier road.